All right, well, woo, boy, did everyone's allergies get really bad there for like the last 10 minutes? Okay, yeah. Every time that movie gets me. Really excited, obviously, to have this panel. It's really bright up here. Travis Okulski, deputy editor of Jalopnik, also a former kart racer, and but for an extreme lack of talent, I'm sure he would be racing in Formula One right now. No, he's a great driver, and he owns a Miata, so he's eminently qualified. But I'm going to hand it over to Travis to moderate the panel.
So that wasn't a roller coaster of emotions at all for anybody, but we've got a pretty great panel. And what I'm going to do, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions for Asif, and since he's a director of this fantastic movie, we're going to do a short panel. Then we're going to open it up so you guys can ask as many questions as you want, as many questions as you don't want. I encourage you to actually ask questions, though, because that's why you're here and paid money. Thank you for coming. So we have Asif Kapadia, director of the movie. I don't really think there's more needed. We have Greg Tracy. He's a 6-time Pikes Peak champion, stunt driver, did the Hot Wheels loop. And then we have Robb Holland. Robb is a touring car driver. He spells his name with 2 B's. Robb's an Aries. He likes, I don't know if he's an Aries. He's a Scorpio. So this is who we have to take us through the tragedy and triumph of motorsport. So I'm going to sit like an actual moderator here. Let's see if the first question is for you, as are probably almost all the questions. Thanks for coming out, everybody else. So I don't know about anybody else, but the first time I saw this movie, I was bawling. The second time, I also cried. I might have been crying up there, but none of you saw that. So since we're all wiping tears away, I mean, you spent the most time with the material, editing it, getting it together. How do you did you get the emotional, how much is your emotional connection to this material still? How much did you experience emotions while you're editing everything together?
I mean, quite a lot. Hello, everyone. Thanks for that reception and for everything. Really, from the beginning, it was very emotional because obviously everyone making the film knew the ending, so it was kind of a weight. So this kind of heaviness making the film. So, in a way, the challenge to make a film like this was to say, well, the obvious thing. Okay, a lot of people, when there's a story like Ayrton's story, you start with a crash and then you kind of go backwards. And we had a version that was like that for quite a long time. And it was not until fairly late where we thought, do you know what, that's wrong. What we have to do, this should be a film celebrating his achievements, celebrating how incredible a man he was and what he stood for and what he meant. So let's start with him young and not talk about what's about to happen and not make the film all about the accident, but actually about this incredible journey and what he achieved. And so that we almost had to take away the emotion because it all gets so heavy. So it was really like, let's just enjoy the ride with him. Let's enjoy winning that championship and the kind of craziness of him screaming when he wins in Brazil and all of that. And to show as much as we can. There's lots of formula in between karts and Formula One that we had to cut out. We just don't have enough time.
Right.
But it was just for it to feel like you're enjoying his pleasure at being, just wanting to go as fast as he possibly could.
Right. And there's a big part, I think, of being a racer, which is compartment. I don't know how to say it. What's the word?
Compartmentalizing.
That's the word. So, Greg, we were talking last night about the Hot Wheels loop and about how the first test was a drone and it failed. And there were no other tests, and you had to go do it. So can you talk us through how present the risks are in your mind when you're doing that sort of thing? You mean, how do you ignore it? How do you keep that stuff to yourself?
Yeah, it's funny, and I mean, first off, following up this today is unbelievable, and my heart is still like racing, and I've seen the movie like 9 times already, so really it's been a wonderful day. I'd like to thank Jalopnik too. This is incredible.
Welcome.
I hope this is like the first of, forever, right? So for me, it's funny because I actually really live 2 lives. I have my stunt life and then I have my racing life. I got into stunts because of my racing, and they're really very different in terms of how you handle the risk and how you think about it. The funny thing is, I've never really considered myself a risk taker, yet that's how I make my living, and that's, that's all I've ever done is take risk and get paid for it. So how I'm not a risk taker, I don't know, but that's how it feels. But with the stunt stuff and the stunt coordinating and things like the loop, you really have to think about all the constant possibilities of things that could go wrong, and then adjust for that. In the racing world, like Pikes Peak this year, I was racing for Mitsubishi. You can't think about any of that. you have to just think about the perfect, if I went up the mountain thinking about every corner I could go off, or if I drove over and looked at the edge of every cliff, that wouldn't work out too well. So, but the loop this year was a good example. We had actually, just a little backstory on that, I've done all the Hot Wheels stuff for the last 5 years on the stunt coordinating side and a good percentage of the driving. We had talked about the loop from the beginning, but obviously it was something that we built up to after Tanner did his world record jump as well in Indy. And we had about 6 months from when I signed the contract to when we were actually going to try it the first time. The initial conversation with just in terms of what the height could be and what we talked about, it started off at 100 feet, and then they figured out the G load would be too high, dropped down where it ended up, which was, I think, 66 feet. It's almost 7 stories high. But the initial conversation was, okay, it's going to be about a 5G entrance. And then once they started building it, they came back and said, I think it's going to be about a 7G entrance, right? Like, well, that's kind of a big difference. I'm starting to get a little concerned with your guys' math, But we just kept pushing it forward, and we actually built a drone car that was identical to the car that we were going to do the loop in. I'll try and sum this up quick, sorry. Really just to see what the G load would do and if it was going to blow the suspension out or whatever. Had a drone pilot from NASA come in, expert, did a bunch of run-ups. Standing with my dad the day before I was going to do the actual test, watched it go to the top, and it just completely failed and fell. Completely crunched. I mean, if you were in it, you would have, probably would have killed you. So my dad kind of put his arm around me and said, I don't know what they're paying you for this. I don't really care. But you have kids, you have a wife, you have a family. I don't know if this is really such a great idea. Which, in terms of being a positive supporter, that didn't help out that much. So I spent about the next 30 minutes just by myself walking over and looking at the marks on it, and really kind of came to just what was a guesstimation that it was driver error, and that he couldn't feel the feedback once the wheel was against the rail. At the very top, there was nothing. So at the very top, there was a sideways skid mark. So that pressure all of a sudden crashed, right? So that being said, the next day, after a long night of no sleep, I showed up, and they came over and asked if I didn't want to do it, they'd push it to Rio, figured out what was wrong, and I just decided to go for it. And at that point, that's when you make that decision. Everything gets tuned out, and it's just full throttle, go.
I mean, it's amazing that you actually did that, because I would have pussied out immediately. Rob, same sort of question to you. Doing, like when we were talking earlier, Nürburgring in the rain, behind somebody 160 miles an hour, anything could go wrong any second. How do you say to yourself, this is a good idea that I'm doing this right now?
Well, you don't, because I think if you really stop to think about it, it's not a good idea. I mean, you're racing in the rain, the Nürburgring, one of the most dangerous tracks in the world, and the conversation we had is that the last race we did it torrential pouring down rain, and I'd gotten stuck behind one of the McLaren MP4 12C GT3 cars, and just with the downforce that car has, it basically sucks all the water from the track and kicks it out right behind. And I was, probably a half a car length behind him, and was trying to get around him. So I needed to set myself up for the next corner so I can get clear of him. And we'd gotten through Brideside and started going up the hill towards Exmoulet. And I've got it on video. There's about 20 seconds where you can't see anything in my windscreen. And I remember the thought going through my head is as long as I can't see anything, I'm okay. And the reason is because I've got this McLaren in front of me. So as long as he was kicking stuff up, I knew I was directly behind him, and I knew he could see. And then after about 20 seconds, I realized it's the dumbest thought you could ever have in your entire life. And so at that point, I actually backed off just a little bit and was able to see. But you just don't think about it. I think if you actually stop to think about what it is that you're doing, you wouldn't do it. And I think that's what is the difference with race car drivers is whatever that switch is in our head is we don't have it. Because I'm like Greg. I don't consider myself a risk taker. In fact, I'm actually adverse to risk, and there are things that I will do in a race car that scare me. So it's not like we're these drones and robots that can just go without thinking. But you whatever the switch is that makes me think that what I'm doing is risky is just it's not present. That gene is not there.
Well, that's probably for the best then, I guess in your line of work.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be making a living at this, would I?
Right. Asif, since you've made so many diverse films, what attracted you to Senna? Why make a documentary about him?
Yeah, because I had not made a documentary before. My background's in drama, but I suppose I'm a big sport fan. I used to watch Formula One. I still watch Formula One. I remember the Senna and Prost era. And so what happened in this particular case was that somebody approached me and said, would you be interested? We're sure you have no interest, but we thought we'd ask. And I just thought, well, I quite like a challenge. I quite like doing something different. And I am a huge lover of sports. I thought, whenever I've tried to do sport in a drama, I just didn't believe it, personally. I just thought something about it doesn't add up on the script. But taking a real story and taking an incredible story like Ayrton's story, I just thought there's something we could do, something special with this. Then the big leap came when we started doing some research and just spent a chunk of time, quite a long time, looking on YouTube to see what existed. Because at this point, I mean, I had that initial conversation with the producer, and it took a year and a half to do the deal with Bernie. And it still wasn't done, to get the footage. So that went on for a long time. So in the meantime, I went off and made another movie. And then I came back and I said, we're doing it, we've got it all agreed. It's still 9 months before anyone got paid. But for 9 months, I was looking at footage, and predominantly, a lot of it was just hidden away somewhere on YouTube. And the more I looked at it, that's when my kind of the director part of me clicked in and thought, this is like the most incredible set of dailies that I've ever seen. I think there is something really special here, because wherever he went, there was a camera there. And I just thought we can make something really great that I don't think anyone's done before. And so it's kind of interesting. It's kind of weird being between you two, because you actually do it, whereas I watch other people doing it. But my feeling was we could do a movie, because Senna was at that particular moment in time where he was incredibly famous. He was incredibly brilliant. But he was just at the point when there were cameras everywhere, but not at the point when kind of PR and publicity people had stepped in to say, no, he didn't say that's off the record. Everything was on the record, whatever he said, because it was before YouTube, before Facebook, before Twitter. Mm-hmm. So there was this very special moment in time where Bernie knew that the future was having sponsorship and cameras everywhere, but it was before the PR machine had kicked in.
Right.
And that's what made that particular era special. And then there's this rivalry, and then there's the McLaren period, and then, Williams come along. So it was just like, you could not have written it better. So I just felt, looking at the footage, we had it all there. All we needed was the time to edit it down. And it was one of those good problems where, I said it before, the first edit was 7 hours long. The first version I showed at a cinema in London was 5 hours. And it's not, I'm telling you, there are so many twists and turns that no one's seen, because you just can't do it. There's no way we could release the film, and we had to cut it down to 100 minutes. And actually, we only had permission from Bernie to use 40 minutes of archive. Really? So the rest of the film, originally, when I signed on, the rest of the film was going to be talking heads, like a conventional documentary. And the big gamble that I took making the film was to say to all of the financiers and everyone, we have to make the film entirely out of archive. Let's not come out of it. Let's just stay in the moment. Let's just keep following him. We'll find a way to make it work, and we'll find a way to pay for it. And that was the big gamble. We were millions over budget. Because when you do a deal with Bernie Ecclestone, you pay for this much. If you change anything, then you're going to pay, a lot of money for every additional minute.
That guy's an ass.
And we were hours over. So that was, he's
Best
very clever. And without him, there's no movie. So that was the big thing. We had to renegotiate a contract. My producers brilliantly did it. But I don't know how many other people have renegotiated contracts with Bernie Ecclestone, but we managed to do it. And that's before he saw the film. He was like, okay, I don't want to see it, but, let's work something out. And that's why we have the film we have now.
Well, good job, because it's awesome. So, great stuff. Greg, you race at Pikes Peak. We've seen a lot of terrifying crashes in the last couple of years. Cars have gotten a lot safer. They've also gotten a lot faster. Does that think that it's enabling us to try more dangerous things, or is it actually making racers safer? Or are we coming to another era where there's going to be something when the car gets so fast and then something does go very wrong, that we're going to be in another era where the cars are too dangerous?
Yeah, no, I mean, I hate to say this, but I think that the last point you made is probably where we're headed. You saw with Pikes Peak when I first started racing there in '96, it was all dirt. Yeah. And in the time that I've raced there, it's now all asphalt the last couple of years. I started off in motorcycles. It just made the transition back to cars there this year. And the reason for that really was that on the motorcycle last year, we'd gotten to the point where we're just going so fast. I mean, I think last year on the top speed I had was 149 on the bottom. And that was the same speed as Paul Dollenbach in his IndyCar, IndyCar style car, which he was the fastest in the car. So the idea of going off in the trees or off the edge of a 6,000-foot cliff at 150 just didn't seem that appealing. So I've made the transition into the car. But I will say that again, the one thing and thinking about it, how brilliant it is that in Formula One there hasn't been any fatalities. That
Since 94, yeah.
that they've sorted. Obviously, when you're going 200 plus miles an hour and you come to a dead stop, things can happen. But Pikes Peak, you're making that transition now where we had, Sebastian Loeb there this year, and it's getting the notoriety worldwide that's bringing in a lot of big talent. But there's also still the amateur contingent there, which is one of the things I've always enjoyed about it, just from the standpoint of walking through and being able to talk to everybody. But the speeds, and you saw that big crash off the side last year.
Yeah.
I think it's been more luck than safety because again, 500-foot cliffs, and I don't you can't be wrapped in bubble wrap for a half a mile and you're not going to survive it, right?
Probably
At a
not.
certain point. So I hope that's not the case. I hope that they're trying to sort that out. But that's a big part with the organization is how do we sort out who's coming and the cars that are going to be here and 160 mile an hour speeds are just it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I have a bunch more questions, but I think it would be better if we opened it up to you guys. So there are. Oh, okay. Never mind. Never mind.
So just so you can kind of get the mentality of a race car driver, if you just listen to what Greg just said, is that he's worried about being in a motorcycle versus a car because when he goes off a 6,000-foot cliff, the car is much safer. So just that's how we think. Yes, the seatbelts thing much better. So.
All right, so what we've been doing all day is telling you to yell out and stuff. That's worked fairly well, but instead this time, because I'm difficult, there's going to be microphones at the sides. So you're going to have to fight each other to get there. Then you can yell to the microphone, don't yell at us, and then ask anybody a question, and they will answer the question that you have just asked them. That's how this is going to work. It's a Q&A. Yeah, you have to walk. You'd have to walk all the way over there.
There's a mic over here. There's a mic
I'm
over
sorry,
there.
and Ray Wirt.
And Ray Wirt has a floating mic
this,
as
this
well.
This tall guy in the front's going to be a roving reporter. It's Ray on the street.
Is it on? Wait, who's going first?
Hey,
All right.
Guy in the middle's going first.
oh, that's me, right? Hey, Asif, question for you. It's kind of weird, right, watching the portrayal of Alan Prost in that movie because I have a lot of friends who actually really admire Alan Prost, right? And to some people, he's a hero in as much as Ayrton Senna is a hero because he's an accomplished driver and all that sort of thing. Would you make a Prost movie and would you cast him differently, or do you think in your mind he's a villain? It's sort of like he did play out as a villain to my mind in the way that he was portrayed in the movie. And do you think that's an honest representation of him, or is there more nuance to that?
The key thing with us was right at the beginning, I was asked to make a film about Ayrton Senna. And the team, there was myself. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I was asked to come on board a film about Ayrton Senna. And there was a writer, Manish Pandey, who was the hardcore Senna fan. He's a big petrol head in our team. And there was a producer, okay? And that's what we set out to do. And the clue, as I kind of have said before, the clue is in the title. It could have been Prost versus Senna. It could have been Hunt versus Lauda. It could be, but we decided to make the Senna movie. And in that case, my job, if you're doing a fiction film or a doc in this case, the idea is I'm going to take his point of view. I'm taking his side. And that's what the film does. It's not trying to be impartial. It's not a BBC documentary saying, well, now let's hear the other side. It was like, no, we're Senna fans, okay? So what does Senna think? And at that point in their career, they were not mates. Whatever people may say afterwards, they weren't. And that's one of the big reasons why I decided not to do the Talking Heads version. Because then, in hindsight, people are going to say a lot of different things. And I speak as someone from England where a lot of the press did not like Senna at the time. There were a lot of people that were definitely on Prost's side. There were a lot of people who were kind of Derek Warwick fans or other drivers, and they didn't like Senna. And so the idea was to show the film from what it was like from his point of view at that moment in time. Whatever happens, happened. And also the other deal was, if we've got footage of it, it's going to be in the movie. We're not going to have lots of anecdotes of what happened in hotel rooms or what happened after they retire and da-da-da-da-da, because then that's not a movie for in my opinion. Not this particular movie. So that was the reasoning for it. So whatever happened, and whatever Senna said, whatever Prost said, That's what happened. Prost got a bit upset afterwards. First of all, he didn't want to watch the film, and then he did say, well, I haven't seen the film, but I don't agree with the film. And then there were other people who said, well, it's not fair on Prost. But people who knew them both, and I would give the best examples. I was on a panel like this. I did a couple with Professor Sid Watkins, who sadly passed away just over a year and a half ago. And it was so good to be able to hand the mic to Sid Watkins and say, Sid, what do you think? And he's like, he knew them both. He said the one person he never had to take out of a car was Alan Prost. He's the only guy that never crashed a car. Okay, but he said that's what Prost was like, and that's what Senna was like. And so, in his opinion, it's a very honest portrayal of what they were like in the middle of it all, not after they retired. When they're at it, that's what they thought of each other. That's what it became. So that's what we tried to show. If we had lots of footage of them sitting down, having sandwiches and having a drink, I would have put it in. And I really looked for it in Imola, particularly. I have to say, I was told that they had lunch together at Imola, and we really looked everywhere, and we never found one photo of the two of them sat together having a nice friendly chat at Imola.
Okay, another question for you. Out of the mountains of editing you did, and the 7 hours of footage down to the 5 hours, down
15,000 hours
Yeah.
of footage.
is there any particular moments that you wish you were able to keep in, and what were they?
Do you know the one that I don't understand why it's not in the film is when he stops his car during qualifying to help Eric Comas. I have no idea why it was in the movie right until the last version, and then we had to. I had a 2-hour cut that I really loved, but we were just told there's no way we can release the 2-hour version. It's too long. It won't work in the cinemas and da-da-da-da-da. So we had to lose 15 minutes right at the last minute. And one of the scenes that went was that scene because it was so powerful to see him do that. And it was a longer sequence. Now, during the titles, we have one short moment where you see him pulling up. But that was so profound, actually, for him to do that. And of all of the footage in this era, I've never seen anyone stop the car and help another driver. And it was also linked to his relationship with Professor Sid Watkins and talking to Sid and saying, what are you doing when you help someone? And Sid said, he followed the procedure perfectly and possibly saved Eric Comas's life. So that's the scene that I would say I wish we'd kept in the film. There's so many other sequences.
Okay, so we're going to do one more in here. Then we're all going to listen to Ray for a couple minutes.
Well, you're going to listen to Matt.
We're going to listen to Matt.
One more question.
We're going to one more question. We're going to listen to Matt. Then we're all going to go to the lobby. And that's it. So
No more questions. No more time for questions.
following direction, Travis. Who was waiting first, or who wants to start talking?
He was waiting first.
Appreciate it. So you obviously were pretty intimate and got a lot of time with the footage of Senna. We talk about his strengths, but with all that you saw and obviously cooperation from the Senna family, what did you feel was his greatest weakness on or off the track?
It's a good question. I mean, in a way, his weakness is, I would say, in a way, in the film, he's not a quitter. He refuses to quit. He refuses to walk away. He won't give up ever, which is one of the things that's most amazing about him. But for me, it's sadly the reason why he drives in Imola is, even though he's not quite right, he doesn't feel like he wants to be right. Be there, he still drives. It's interesting to hear what you said, because I've spent so much time looking at that footage of Ayrton in the car, and he looks so troubled. And there's a couple of things. Of all of the races of his that we saw, there are only 2 where he sat in the car on the track before he's about to go out without his helmet on. Why that day he decided not to wear his helmet and kind of in a way to show everyone how troubled he looks, I don't know. There's only one other race that I saw in Monaco where he sat there with that. But the rest of the time, he had his helmet on. All you could see was his eyes, totally focused on exactly where he's going to go. So there was something that wasn't right. Everyone that met him that weekend said something wasn't right. Possibly there's some other stuff going on, personal stuff as well going on. And I thought, what could have made him say, today I'm not going to race? And my only thing is, I have kids. And I just thought, if he had kids, would that have been the thing that would have said, maybe not today? I don't know. I haven't come over it. But that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Thanks.
Thanks to Ray. See you for that other movie. There's some other movie we're watching tonight.